all eyes will soon be on France. Paris is about to host over 10,000 athletes from 206 nations. But I'm not here for the 2024 Summer Olympics. I'm preparing for a rival event, a far more important event, the inaugural Beer Drinking Olympics. Ahead of this prestigious event, I'll be visiting medal contending countries in beer's heartland of Europe to sample some traditional brews and try some classic beer snacks, or some inspiration in my own beer snack recipes to represent each nation in the top 30 countdown. However, I won't be creating beer snacks here in Europe. I'll be creating them here on a rooftop in Port Adelaide, South Australia.
But I can't have beer snacks without beer.
So I'll pair them with 30 different unique beer styles from 30 of the best craft breweries across Australia and New Zealand. Join me as I tour Europe on the beer trip of a lifetime, and then check out which 30 beer snacks I will attempt to create for the first time. Touching down in Paris to start my epic European beer tour, I was looking forward to trying some traditional French beer. Somewhat surprisingly, Paris doesn't have the volume of craft breweries that you might expect, and unfortunately for me, most of them were shut, being a Monday. After some sightseeing, I found myself at this Belgian-style pub. With over 100 beers available, I had to sample one of the few French offerings. This amber farmhouse ale comes from a brewery in the north of France, close to the Belgian border. A truly spectacular beer with a fruity and floral aroma and a strong malt backbone. I enjoyed it with a fantastic charcuterie board and some classic French fries. So once again I was off to wander the streets of Paris, which I found just as beautiful as I'd remembered during my trip of Europe almost 20 years ago. With our ever-changing world, it was comforting to know that such an incredibly beautiful city could keep every bit of character and remain timeless. The only noticeable change was the addition of cell phones and influencers, all finding the best angles of the Eiffel Tower for a few selfies. As day turned to night, I was getting hungry for dinner and was keen to visit a traditional Parisian brasserie. I found my way to this classic pub and enjoyed a delicious steak and fries with what was quite likely the best cured meat I've ever tried. It tasted like the most perfect combination of salami and prosciutto. The next morning I took a look at the Arc de Triomphe, then found a nearby cafe to shelter from the rain with a hot coffee and some tasty chocolate crepes for breakfast. A short walk away brought me to another epic view of the Eiffel Tower that was very popular despite the bad weather. Soon it was time to say goodbye to Paris, with my excitement building for all the historic beer venues I was about to discover. But not before checking out the City Hall, which was all decked out for the second biggest Olympic Games of the year. Arriving in the historic town square in Pilsen, I was greeted with a charming little market. But let's be honest, I came to Pilsen for one reason: to try the famous Pilsner beer. The pale lager beer style that has become far and away the most popular around the world. I was eager to find out if the original was in fact the best. However, the first stop for the day, I needed some caffeine. I hit up this little cafe that roasts their own coffee, which was indeed delicious, and I couldn't resist trying one of their lovely Czech pastries. Pilsen is a charming little town to wander around and enjoy the slower pace of life. No doubt the main attraction is their rich brewing history dating back to the 1300s. I made sure to visit the oldest restaurant and hotel in Pilsen, established in 1637. This was the perfect place for me to try my first authentic Czech Pilsner, fresh from the tank, and what an experience it was. Light lagers rarely get me excited because they lack flavour. This one, on the other hand, was so full of flavour it was hard to believe it was actually a Pilsner. The marinated cheese paired so well with the beer, and the hearty potato dumplings filled me up nicely. Having got a taste for the Pilsner in this town, I tried another famous establishment. This historic building was once a malt house and is now connected to the town's brewery museum. This place is renowned for serving unfiltered Pilsner. After waiting my whole life to drink the best Pilsner ever, it didn't take me long to have one even better. I think unfiltered really is the ultimate Pilsner experience. Having sampled and thoroughly enjoyed the Pilsner in the pubs in town, I headed straight for the source, ready to take a brewery tour. The first batch of Bavarian-style bottom-fermented pale lager was brewed here in 1842. This was officially the world's first pale lager, the most consumed beer style in every corner of the globe today. Pilsner Urquell takes advantage of the town's extremely soft water supply, uses local Saaz hops and English-style malt kilns to achieve an extremely pale malt. The bottling line here fills 120,000 bottles per hour, returnable bottles for the Czech market and new bottles for the export market. A chance to wander around the old brew house and take a close look at these stunning copper kettles dating back to the 1930s was a real treat. Then seeing the fully automated modern brew house that opened in 2004 was equally impressive. Certainly the best part of the tour was saved for last. A walk through part of the 9 kilometres of underground cellars at the brewery, where beer is fermented in these great oak barrels. Lucky for us, there was an old man down there to pour us a glass of the most amazing unfiltered and unpasteurized Pilsner you could imagine. This went down far too easily. A short train ride later, I arrived in Prague. After tasting real Pilsner for the first time, it was clear to me why the Czechs drink more beer per capita than anyone in the world. I was ready to discover what other beer styles Prague had to offer, having heard it was a bit of a paradise for beer geeks like myself. Wandering through the Prague town square, I spotted this classic pub that I'd read about and was keen to check out. Its name translates to the Hangman's and had a medieval theme to it. I didn't end up getting a beer there, as they only accepted cash, most likely to get rid of tourists like myself. So I was on my way to explore a little more of the historic town centre, a place with rich history dating back to the 10th century, when it was a marketplace at the crossroads of European trade routes. I then made my way down to the stunning Vltava River to catch the sunset. This river is an iconic feature in Prague, with 18 of the city's bridges crossing it. I was here to soak in the sights at the end of a glorious day, but most of all to visit this brewery on a boat. This very unique microbrewery was founded in 2017. It has all the brewing equipment on the boat to supply their restaurant with unique craft brews. I ordered a tasting paddle with nothing standing out as particularly good or bad. I did enjoy the experience of trying the Czech pickled sausage, the little fried fish, and hand-cut chips. For dessert, I was back at the town square for a chimney cake cooked over charcoal, an invention for tourists rather than a local tradition, but it looked too good not to try. The next day I took in a spectacular panoramic view of the city from the edge of the Prague Castle. This vantage point gave me a fantastic perspective of Prague, with its ancient architecture separated by the snaking river with its stunning bridges. The Prague Castle dates back to the 9th century and is the largest ancient castle in the world, making it one of the most popular tourist attractions in Prague, with over 1.8 million visitors a year. Nowadays it houses the President of the Czech Republic. This was enough sightseeing for now, as it was almost afternoon and I'd yet to try any beers. Close by is the Strahov Monastery Brewery, where they have been brewing beer for over 600 years. They have a great outdoors seating area and beautiful copper brew kettles on display inside. I made the rookie error of choosing 2 smoky flavoured beers. Although the smoked porter was very enjoyable, the Polish oak smoked wheat ale was a bit too strong a flavour even for me. Back down the hill, I took in some more of the stunning views of the city, through the winding paths of the equally stunning Seminary Garden. Back in the city, I was on a mission to find some good beer, and I think I found the right spot. I tried 5 of their 10 taps, requesting only beers from Czech craft breweries. The dark lager, pineapple yuzu sour, IPA, hazy lager, and a raspberry and vanilla stout were all genuinely banging brews and an utter delight. Leaving very happy with myself, I was in need of a good lunch and keen to try some more Czech cuisine. This place was on the top of my must-visit list. The oldest and most famous beer hall in Prague is one of the few places in Central Europe to be continuously brewing their own beer for over 500 years. Founded in 1499, this old place oozes history and class. To be honest, it was almost a little intimidating, with these guys taking their beer extremely seriously. I initially refused this shot of honey liqueur, but the guy didn't take no for an answer, and I'm glad that he didn't. The dark lager, accompanied by smoked pork neck, More marinated cheese and a slice of rye bread really hit the spot. After a sneaky afternoon nap, I was ready to eat again. I headed back across the famous Charles Bridge that was swarming with tourists in awe of this 14th century bridge and its 30 statues acknowledging the city's medieval past. This took me to a place recommended by a guy I met on the train in Paris, a newly opened restaurant serving the local Kozel beer fresh from the tank. Their menu features Czech dishes that I would have loved to have tried more of, but I thoroughly enjoyed the pork knuckle that had been marinated in their dark lager. A fantastic way to finish off my time in Prague. After a short bus ride from Prague the next day, I'd arrived for a quick tour of Cesky Krumlov. This charming little town dates back to the Middle Ages and looks like something straight out of Game of Thrones. It's a World Heritage Site due to its well-preserved Gothic architecture, with the spectacular Cesky Krumlov castle overlooking the town. It's no wonder it's a tourist hotspot and surely one of Europe's most beautiful towns. It was certainly a tiny place that didn't take me long to do a good loop around, allowing me just enough time to try some of the beers from the Krumlov brewery. They've been making beer here for over 400 years. I got a tasting of their 4 beers on offer. 3 were very similar lagers and 1 a seasonal green beer. All not particularly memorable, except the green beer. I guess I won't forget that in a hurry. As a very late breakfast, I ordered the only food on offer, some boiled sausages served with mustard, horseradish, and the delicious rye bread I'd been enjoying throughout my trip, so I couldn't complain. As I got off the bus in a brand new country, I was hit with automatic regret, as I was full of boiled sausage and had no room to try the famous Bosna hot dog. I'd arrived in the charming Linz, Austria's 3rd largest city. Although I wasn't hungry, I was of course more than ready to try some traditional Austrian brews, which led me to this fine establishment in the centre of town, with a history that dates back to 1595, when it was a monastery garden. Since 1929, it's been operated as a restaurant owned by Stagl Brewery in Salzburg, serving beer from Austria's most popular independent brewery. On a busy night, you can imagine the atmosphere in here being incredible. However, today wasn't a day to be stuck inside. It was an absolutely glorious afternoon to enjoy the marvellous beer garden. You could easily settle in here for a long session enjoying the afternoon sun in this tree-filled courtyard. I, on the other hand, stayed only long enough to taste a few beers. Each of the Helles Lager, Keller beer and wheat beer were all incredibly well crafted, making it difficult not to stay for the rest of the day. But alas, I had to move on. Lucky for me, my hotel in Salzburg had a fantastic restaurant, so I didn't have to go far to find a great feed. This place served traditional Austrian pub food with the excellent Stagl Brewery beers I'd already tried in Linz. I really enjoyed the Vienna-styled fried chicken, which was complemented wonderfully with the cranberry sauce and a delicious wheat beer. The next day I was off to explore the picturesque old city of Salzburg. The Salzach River divides the town, with 19th century buildings on the new city side and medieval and Baroque architecture on the old city side. I stumbled upon this delightful farmers market that's been running for more than 150 years, with all sorts of enticing food, including this stand with more types of pretzels than I knew could exist. Some of my favourite memories while travelling have been experiencing the sights and sounds while photographing some of the amazing characters in markets across the world. The colour and chaos always makes for some interesting images. At the foot of this grand old church is the busiest stall in the market. This old bloke was doing a great job slinging hot dogs to feed the hungry hordes. Salzburg is the birthplace of Mozart, whose face was seen everywhere in the old city, which also features a grand statue of the famous composer. After a nice morning of exploring the old city, I was ready for a beer and headed on foot out to the suburbs to visit Austria's most popular brewery. This place has been family owned since it was founded in 1492. It has a large open beer garden that was just glorious on this sunny day. I tried a red Keller beer, a Dunkel, and a specialty beer that uses ancient grains. Each beer was faultless and paired so well with this platter of beer snacks. It was a unique experience trying the traditional radish dish that had a refreshing crunch. The Stiegel Brewery is a must visit for anyone coming to Salzburg. The vibes at this beer garden would be hard to beat, but the next place I ventured to felt like a theme park for beer enthusiasts, with Austria's biggest beer garden with 1,400 seats. This brewery was founded in 1621 and has become an institution for tourists and locals alike. Upstairs is a bunch of stalls full of Austrian beer food that reminds me of a sporting stadium. I went to find myself a stone mug and chose the half-size 500ml instead of the litre mug. A quick wash in the fountain, I paid for my beer, received a token, and joined the line. These two absolute legends were non-stop pouring beer out of great big wooden barrels, very efficiently serving well over 1,000 thirsty guests. It helps when everyone has prepaid for their beer and there was only one beer to choose from. This beer is known as a Märzen, which means March beer in English. It's a German-style beer traditionally brewed in March, ready for Oktoberfest. This style is now fairly rare in Germany. However, in Austria, their lighter colour and flavour variation is very popular. This beer was more like a pale lager than the dark brown, full-bodied and bitter German original version. I took my beer out to the beer garden and found this table full of all my mates. I arrived in Munich with a mission of visiting as many of the big 6 breweries as possible. These are the only breweries allowed to participate in Oktoberfest. My first stop was the famous Augustiner Brau, Germany's oldest independent brewery, founded in 1328. This fantastic old building was transformed from a barn into a beer hall in the 1990s. The rustic feel of the old barn gave the venue such a fantastic atmosphere. It was a Saturday night and the place was buzzing, with what was most certainly a packed room with a capacity of 300 seats. With the most incredible bar in the middle of the hall, surrounded by an old copper brew kettle. This once home of the brewery horse stables is now packed with tourists, locals, and groups in matching outfits enjoying a lad's trip together. I was eager to try their famous beer and started with the classic lager, followed by a delicious Dunkel. The lager was on another level, a truly world-class Helles lager with a beautiful straw colour, a perfect balance of sweetness and hop bitterness. The Dunkel was the ideal dessert, with its chestnut colour, mild roasted aromas, and a light caramel and chocolate aftertaste. I ordered a platter piled high with German delicacies, the perfect dish to start discovering the best beer snacks of Germany. It included a quarter pork knuckle, a giant pretzel, lots of cold meats and pickles, and Obatster, which is a Bavarian cheese spread. This place was an unforgettable experience, leaving me excited to see what else Munich had to offer. The next day I headed to the central square in the heart of Munich. This is home to the town hall and has been the city's main square since 1158. It was already obvious to me that the locals in Munich loved their beer, as the pubs were full of people on a Sunday morning. So it was time for my first beer stop of the day, Hofbrau, a brewery founded in 1589. This place was the top of my must-visit list, as it's almost certainly the most famous beer hall in the world. It's an institution for beer lovers and attracts up to 30,000 visitors a day. They have these incredible lockers to keep the regular customers' stone mugs in. The ground floor is the centerpiece of this 3-story building, where brewing equipment once stood over a century ago. Now Bavarian tavern music is played every day, and vendors roam around selling giant pretzels. The outdoor beer garden seemed like the best place for me to sit and savour one of the world's most renowned Helles lagers. It was so crisp and fresh with a subtle maltiness. This beer was the definition of easy drinking, and it left me with no doubt as to why this beer is so popular throughout the world. The weather was perfect for a stroll in the park, so I headed for the English Garden, one of the biggest inner city parks in the world. I had heard that surfers come here to ride a constant wave on the Eisenbach River at the southern end of the park. I was pleased to find a few of them braving the freezing water. This man-made wave has been a popular spot for river surfing for over 40 years. These surfers put on a little show with a bunch of spectators gathering to witness the unique spectacle. But it wouldn't be a German park without a beer garden, right? This massive expanse had seating for 7,000 people, which, believe it or not, is still just the second largest beer garden in Munich. In the centre of the fun and frivolity stands the Chinese Tower, a structure built in 1789. I ordered a Dunkel and a selection of German sausages, sauerkraut, mustard, and of course a giant pretzel. I left the beer garden blown away with the sense of community and family vibe. I doubt I'd feel safe in a park in Australia with thousands of people drinking beer all day. A real credit to the German beer drinking culture. I exited the park and walked several kilometres, making my way to the third brewery on my list. It was mid-afternoon and looking unlikely I would make it to all of the big 6. This stop looked like I was entering a Disney castle. Lowenbräu Brewery was founded in 1383, and this beer house opened in 1883. I headed out to the stunning beer garden to soak up some sun on the beautiful afternoon. I was very pleased with my brew of choice with this delicious and rather unique tasting dark wheat beer. A real afternoon delight with notes of caramel, banana and clove. The ambience of the late afternoon in the beer garden was hard to beat. However, with just 24 hours in Munich, I wanted to explore a little more of this amazing city. Everywhere I went, I was seeing people enjoying the outdoor seating at the pubs across the city. So I decided it was time to head to my next of the big 6 breweries. A short ride on the metro took me to the Paulina Brewhouse, just outside the city. This brewery dates back to 1634, with the beer house opening in 1989. This place serves authentic German meals in its cozy dining rooms. They have a beautiful all-copper brew house in the middle of the restaurant. This visually stunning setup is used to create specialty beers exclusive for the venue, all brewed by an obviously very talented young lady who has added some modern beers to complement the brewery's traditional classic. I thoroughly enjoyed her IPA that used Australian Galaxy hops. I also tried their famous lager and authentic schnitzels served with roast potatoes and cranberry sauce. The schnitzel was on point. The potatoes could have been a bit crispier, but I did love the addition of the sweet and tart cranberry sauce. I made a short stopover in Cologne to try their famous Kolsch beer style. First stop was Peter's Brewhouse, a brewery dating back to 1544. With this amazing venue opening in 1994, it has an incredible stained glass ceiling and character in every corner. The charm of this beer house provided such a cozy atmosphere with eye-catching art on the walls and families enjoying hearty traditional German food. The Kolsch is served in these tiny glasses to stay nice and cold and carbonated. I was blown away with the freshness and depth of flavour in the beer. This dude would come around with trays of Kolsch and make a mark each time he gave you a refill. I had to try a little snack of raw pork mince on bread. That was an excellent pairing with one of the best beers I'd tried on my trip so far. Stop number 2 was the Brewhaus Sion. Beer has been brewed at this site since 1318. The whole building was rebuilt after being bombed in World War II. As I entered the brewhouse, I watched the barman topping up a tray of Kolsch, ready for some thirsty customers. I was utterly impressed with the quality of beer here in Cologne and can certainly understand why the city is so proud of their unique style of beer. I paired my beer with a hearty lunch of currywurst, which is a sausage dish with a slightly sweet curry sauce. It was very tasty and an enjoyable combination with what was an equally good Kolsch. I wandered past the third tallest church in the world, the spectacular Cologne Cathedral. This church began construction in 1248 and wasn't completed until 1880. It now attracts over 6 million visitors a year. I may have left the best stop for last on my beer tour around Europe. I'd arrived in Brussels, the home of so many fantastic, dark, full-flavoured and sour beer styles. I headed straight to Moder Lambic, an absolute institution in the Brussels beer scene. A must-visit for anyone looking to explore the world of Belgian brews. Located in the hip neighbourhood of Sint-Gilles, I counted 28 beers on the tap list. Not that I had a good look, with the barman just bringing me his recommendations. I started out with an apricot lambic, then a goose, which is a blend of old and young lambic. This paired with a kind of pulled pork that was a bit dry and lacked flavour for me. However, I followed it with a cheese platter that made up for it with some of the most delicious cheese I've ever tasted, with an outrageously good Belgian quad and an equally impressive Belgian triple. That ended an incredible day, waking up in Munich, trying Kolsch in Cologne over lunch, and an evening spent sipping on the finest Belgian brewers in Brussels. The following day marked my last day of the trip, and there was plenty on the list of beer spots to visit in Brussels, so I headed to Cantillon Brewery just as they opened. Founded in 1900, this place is one of the world's best lambic breweries. The insanely good valued self-guided tour was like stepping back in time, a real treat to see the old brewing equipment that is still being used today to create spontaneously fermented beers that were once considered old-fashioned but are now well sought after. It is no surprise this brewery with its small 10,000 litre mash tun can't keep up with the global demand for their famous beer. After hops aged for 3 years are added to the wort, it is then cooled in this beautiful copper vessel, which is open to airborne bacteria and wild yeasts, helping give the lambic its famous sour taste. Once cooled, the wort is pumped into old wine barrels, either 225 or 500 litres. Slowly maturing the lambic in these barrels gives it a wonderful wine-like characteristic. The demand for these beers worldwide is high, and they can be hard to find. Some of their beers are barrel aged for 3 years, so they are vastly different from the mass-produced beers that make up most of the beer market. In fact, they only bottle around 400,000 beers per year, and I was lucky enough to sample a few at the end of the tour, including a lambic, which was barrel aged for a year, a goose, and a raspberry lambic. Having left the brewery after a fantastic tour, I headed on foot to the centre of Brussels. Passing a great little second-hand market selling all kinds of knickknacks, I took a quick look at the royal palace where the king conducts his business, but apparently resides in another palace somewhere. I then passed this stunning garden that provides a panoramic view of the city and a green transition from the royal quarter to the grand palace and a historic town centre. The garden was perfectly manicured and made for a very scenic route for me to arrive at the old town square, aptly named the Grand Palace. This has to be one of the most beautiful city squares in the world. It dates back to the 11th century and is surrounded by buildings with spectacular architecture, including the Gothic town hall with its impressive spire. Not far from the square, down a cobblestone alleyway, is the Delirium Cafe. This place has a Guinness World Record for having over 2,000 unique beers on offer. The legendary spot for beer enthusiasts was packed full of character, with every inch of the pub covered in decorations. Although very quiet on this afternoon, You could tell the place would go off during a busy night. I went to grab a beer, but there were more taps than I'd ever seen at one bar, so I was paralysed with choice and ventured to their adjoining bar to do the tourist thing. Order a beer flight with each of the 10 beers on tap there. After polishing off the biggest beer tasting I'd ever tackled, I headed next door to a fancy looking seafood restaurant to try the famous mussels of Brussels. I ordered the chili variety and washed them down with a wonderful brown Abbey ale. It was then time to try another classic Belgian dish. Around the corner was the perfect spot for dessert, a funky little waffle shop that looked to be very popular. I indulged in the whipped cream and pistachio waffle that was just to die for. Sadly, my trip was coming to an end, but there was room for one final stop on my beer tour. It was at a more modern joint called the Brussels Beer Project. This is one of several tap rooms from the brewery that was founded in 2013 and is known for their experimental and sustainable brews. Here I tried some interesting beers including a smoked lambic, saison with gooseberries, saison IPA, and a cherry sour, paired with the all-time classic beer snack, a delicious wood-fired pizza. This was a fabulous end to what was truly the beer trip of a lifetime, and I was feeling very blessed.
Thanks for joining me on my beer tour of Europe. Make sure to check out part 2 of the video, where I'm back here in Australia using some of the inspiration I gathered from my trip to create beer snacks and beer pairings for some of the best performing countries in the beer drinking Olympics.